Welcome to our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri and the Joy of Savitri. As always, with our beloved brother, Alok. Namaste, sir. We begin today Canto 2, which is actually one of my most beloved cantos, because we have the description of Savitri, of which Amal Kiran said, ne plus ultra. There is nothing above this, nothing higher. And Jyoti Narayan agreed with me completely. You know the passage well.
Yes, he asked Aurobindo also. He had asked for some poetry, yes, which is of through and through our mind. And Aurobindo sent this sample.
Yeah.
And he said, if you have asked for it, this is the one. Yes.
And then in his humility he said, there is perhaps something
yes.
of the overmind.
So it has the touch directly of Aurobindo himself.
Yes. And we see here this extraordinary look back into Savitri's lives, who she was, and all through the past, and he comes up with this line here, and it's a long sentence. It's a long sentence about,
I think page 11.
Page 11, yes. As in a many-hued, flaming inner dawn, her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view. From the bright country of her childhood's days, and the blue mountains of her soaring youth, and the paradise groves and peacock wings of love, to joy, clutched under the silent shadow of doom, in a last turn where heaven raced with hell. And then he gives us this line, 12 passionate months led in a day of fate. An absolute supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. An hour comes when fail all nature's means, forced out from the protecting ignorance and flung back on his naked primal need. He at length must cast from him his surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within.
So you see there are beautiful, interesting suggestions here. One is that when she looks back, there are various ways of looking back. There is a mental memory where people remember a kind of details of what they conversed with, and what was the thought, you said this, you said that. Then there are emotional memories. But here, by the suggestion of flaming inner dawns, these are memories which she has treasured into her deepest, inmost soul.
Yes.
So these are more like psychic memories which she has gathered within. But what is interesting is, just in this one passage, which of course is one of my favorites also, I think, none can reach heaven who has not passed through hell.
Yes.
So the corollary is also true. If you are going through hell, means heaven is nearby. Just wait for the end of the tunnel. But look at these wonderful, interesting suggestions. Darkness drawing near to God. But even more interesting, protecting ignorance. So ignorance protects us from what? From the bliss of the infinite. And why? Because we cannot take it. It will be too overwhelming.
Yes.
It will be too vast.
Yes.
So, Arjuna's ignorance was that me and Krishna are two human beings, and we are friends, and we are here on the battlefield. But when for a moment the veil of ignorance is gone, and when he looks at Krishna with another eye, then he is frightened. He sees that the divine is not just the savior, he is also the destroyer. And he cannot take this vision. He is shattered. He is shaken to the core.
Shattered is the word.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Because it shatters the ego.
Yeah.
That's why the ego finds it so difficult to surrender to the divine. Because it means breaking down of limits of our thoughts, limits of our feelings, limits of our usual will, which moves within confined and narrow channels and directions. So all these limits are shattered. So ignorance is needed because if prematurely they are shattered, we may actually go crazy. Because all the limits keep us safe and make us feel human, make us feel who we are. And when these measures are gone, the standards of conduct, as Aurobindo says, or standards of life which ordinarily drive humanity, they are gone.
No more safety.
No more safety. So this is the protecting ignorance.
Yeah.
So ignorance plays its role in the beginning, like a child cannot gaze long to the light because he'll be blinded. So this is one suggestion where we see something paradoxical. Then again, naked primal need. So we have never thought it like that, that what is our naked primal need? Basically, here Aurobindo is using the word naked in what an interesting way. On one side, there is the protecting ignorance, which is like a dress around us. Then when we strip ourselves of all these garbs of being, the pretentious garb, the shows, the shams, the false identities with which we move around into the world, flattering ourselves or demeaning ourselves equally, Sometimes people don't realize. The other day, someone here only was suddenly quoting Tagore for whatever reason. And he quoted Tagore as saying that, Tagore says that people flatter me a lot, but I know how hollow I am. And still I take on to that and take it as if it's true, something to that extent. But in the bargain, I lose my contact with you. Now, at one level it is true, but we are neither hollow nor are we great. We need not be, both evaluations. One is a Rajasic ego, the other is a Tamasic ego. In fact, we are not, or we just are. One of the two propositions is fine. But the moment we put an epithet, so what is this naked primal need? Whether life or death I am. That is something fundamental. Nobody can take it away. That no doom has the power to take away. So we have this naked primal need, ungarbed. So it starts with, protecting ignorance, the naked primal need, and then ungarbed. So garb of the ego, when that is removed, then we know who we are. And sometimes in life, crisis comes to do that precisely. See, otherwise we are all the time carrying these all identities around us. But there are moments in life when nothing helps. That moment we have to fall back upon who we think we are, who we believe we are.
And how many ways Sri Aurobindo can phrase something of the soul.
Yes.
The ungarbed entity.
Yes.
Entity within.
If we just make a compilation of all the things that Aurobindo has said about the soul from Savitri, we'll see how much plasticity and infinity pours into a single thing. And that's why the joy of Savitri, because what I realize that, we become sometimes too technical, too mechanical, this line, this word, but when you are freed from all those trappings, Savitri is an ocean, swim into it.
Yes.
Doesn't matter where, which, just read it and take the joy of it.
Yes.
So, this line, as you said. Another thing which I find very interesting, that here in the issue, he actually brings out what is the real problem. And I think of course, those who have endowed with faith, they trust Aurobindo because it's the eye of faith. But logically speaking, why one trusts Aurobindo? Logically, purely. I don't like this word when we deal with our master, but nevertheless, there are logical logicians, because you can give me a solution if you know the problem. There are doctors who have hardly heard you and they begin to write a prescription. And the patient is not happy. He says, you have not heard me. You have not understood my issue. What really is the issue of man? Now, it's easy to say it's an illusion and, moksha, but this is not the issue at all. Nobody, if life is beautiful here, nobody would want moksha.
Yes.
Life is not beautiful in its appearances and we want it to be beautiful. This is man's real aspiration. Moksha is like when there is no choice, then well, okay, maybe this can't change. But if this can change, any day we will prefer this because that's why we are here. So this is the problem. Now Sri Aurobindo touches that core and says why it is not so and how it can become so. After all, that's why we begin to grow with an idea that life should be perfect. It's inbuilt. We are programmed like that deep within. And then when we see it's not perfect.
And he brings in so beautifully the karmic
Yes.
thing. He says, of course, this is a long sentence.
It's worth it. He brings out the problem at several places here, and it's worth reading each one of them.
Okay. Start with, for only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. Only the self that builds this figure of self can raise the fixed interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities, and keeps still lurking in our conscious acts the trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds. Disown the legacy of our buried selves, the burdensome heirship to our vanished forms, accepted blindly by the body and soul.
So he does not blindly subscribe to the karmic mechanism.
No, not at all.
He says it's not right, it's not fair, and anybody with a little common sense can see this.
Yeah.
What happened in my past, maybe few lives back, and yet it is so true that it becomes a fetter to your feet. Even in one life we see, as is beautifully put, the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak.
Yeah.
It's so true of everyone. And people, because of this simple thing, they either give up or they begin to develop guilt, they begin to have issues. But basically, why should it be that my past hinders my future?
Yes.
It should not. So he points out first that yes, there is a trail of old forgotten deeds.
Yes.
We don't remember, but we accept it blindly.
But then you read those next few lines
Yeah.
because they're so beautiful. A once living story?
Yes.
Good.
Now, even this, an episode, yes.
Yes. Where are we?
An
An episode in an unremembered tale. Its beginning lost, its motive and plot concealed. A once living story has prepared and made our present fate child of past energies.
And then he gives us a solution, which he has given in the beginning,
Yes.
that the self can erase. So the first thought that comes very clearly, that destiny can be changed. And I think it's important to emphasize it any number of times.
Yes.
This idea that has gone into the Indian mind that, karma is inevitable, and it has been thrust upon us to believe that Indian thought is fatalistic. But wherever I have read Indian thought, I have found it's not true. The Ramayana is not fatalistic, otherwise Rama should have said, well, that's my destiny. I had told my wife not to step out, but she stepped out. Now what can I do? My past karmas. Krishna is not fatalistic. Krishna bids Arjuna to fight. Whether you win or lose, fight.
To win or lose the godlike game for man.
Exactly. Savitri is not fatalistic.
Right.
None of the stories I have read in Indian mythology are fatalistic. I don't know where this idea of karma as being something fixed has come in. Probably the Pandits, because then you can go to them and give money and get some puja done. I'm sorry.
We won't edit that.
No, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's important to disabuse our mind of these
Absolutely.
archaic thoughts which are not there. I mean, I'll be very happy if somebody points out. But it's not there. Indian thought takes the challenge of death, of fate. And it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Take the challenge. And I love that spirit. And I think that's the Aryan spirit if you really go back to the past.
Yes.
That's the Aryan spirit. To win or lose is not the issue. To play the game well. Now, I would feel sorry if I didn't play the game well. Not whether I won or lose. Who would like to win by fluke?
Right.
But if you play the game well, even if you lose, you have the joy at the end of the day that, well, I played it. It doesn't matter how I played it. I mean, I played it well. It doesn't matter what was the result of it. So this thing that he's basically giving us that, and this will come again at the end. Look the power in these lines, the fixity of the cosmic sequences, because there is an interconnectedness. Fastened with hidden inevitable links, we cannot see them. And yet, she must disrupt, dislodge by her soul's force. So, what is the process? Just keep increasing the soul power within. Nothing else required. Of course, there is grace and all that comes to later. Just keep increasing the soul power. There is no other power which can undo this fixed sequence. People try to struggle with their mind and then they fail. Then they again do a mental tapasya or they try some method, technique. But unless you increase the light within, how can you struggle with darkness while you are still in darkness? So, he gives us the way. Her past, a block on the immortal's road, make a raised ground and shape anew her fate. So this is one part of it.
Yeah.
But there is another, if it was just a question of individual and the karmic sequences, there would have been no problem.
Right.
I mean, it's problem, but not that much problem. But there are cosmic powers that don't want you to go further.
And this is what she has to face.
She has to face the gods.
Yes.
The titans, none of them want the human soul to be a victor. So we have those lines also which come later also, but here she has to, because this human beings can't do.
Yeah.
So she has to plead our case. Gods, don't keep men as cattle. Set them free.
Yeah.
They are my children.
Yeah.
And equally to the titans, don't dare to hold my children captive. So she has to fight this. Then there is another place where he describes the problem very beautifully, and we'll come back to that passage you were referring to because that's a very beautiful passage. So just the problem how he states, we'll come back to that passage, but now on page 17.
17. I had something for 17.
Yes. Maybe
Okay. From Shakespeare. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To say we end, to sleep, sea of trouble, to die, to sleep no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache, and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. And then look at this.
So this is the other challenge. The darkness which is there in terrestrial things, the very atmosphere of earth. The moment you enter into the mortal cloak.
Yes. And Sri Aurobindo now.
Yes.
Whether to bear with ignorance and death, or hew the ways of immortality, to win or lose the godlike game for man, was her soul's issue, thrown with destiny's dice. But not to submit and suffer was she born. To lead, to deliver was her glorious part.
And then
Look at the difference in Shakespeare and Sri Aurobindo's lines. Incredible, huh? Shakespeare's so powerful, but
profundity, the profundity heights. Look how he describes our humanity, which we so much gloat about.
Yeah.
The other day I was reading, mother says, well, what the scientists are doing, it's all right, it's their business. But I am yet to meet somebody who can predict the future. You are still a slave. You may have discovered all the laws, but you remain still a slave. Slave of ignorance, slave of death, slave of all the forces of nature that can besiege you. And here comes a description, and it is very, just as in the Gita, in his own way, Sri Krishna awakens Arjuna to fight. So here, when Aurobindo speaks of this passage, in this passage, he's asking us not to be this. And we never look at ourselves like this. We think we are all in control, and we like to be in control, and we put one or two human beings under us and dominate over them, and we think we are in control. But is that really so? Now the latest, the myth, the many bubbles are being burst. The myth of privacy, the myth of freedom, Facebook, all the data. You thought you were in control. You thought that nobody was watching you because people are very decent out there, because they speak decently. But here the myth goes. Look at this line. Here was no fabric of terrestrial make. If you really want to be part of Aurobindo's movement, what is needed? There are many ways of looking at it. This is one of them. It's not that you have to know all the shastras, you have to be a deeply, devoutly religious man. None of this. Look at the Kshatriya part. Here was no fabric of terrestrial.
Yeah.
So what is this? Our way of life which we should discard. Fit for a day's use by busy, careless powers. The gods and the titans and many others in between, they use us, drive us from morning till night. An image fluttering on the screen of fate came and vanished.
Yeah.
I remember a story of Chote Narayanji, incidentally. So, he was like a wandering sadhu. And when he had come here, he had asked mother for some work. And mother sent a message through Nalnida, he is reading and writing, let him continue reading, writing. So he continued that, and that's how he started going everywhere and speaking with mother's permission. People have this weird idea that, you're not supposed to go speak and must work for a certain fixed hours. But this he was telling me. He said, so, he would travel. I had very nice moments with him. And so he was sharing that once Nainital he used to come, then here also we became very close. So he was sharing a story that he said, once I went to a rich man's house. So he asked him to stay, so he stayed on. So the rich man asked him, Ki Chote Narayanji, you are such a good writer. Can you write my biography? So Chote Narayanji said, okay, likh denge. He had a fantastic sense of humor. He is enjoying every day morning cup of tea, and he was really inwardly a free man. So after 10-15 days, he asked him, Kuch hua kya? Have you, something could you write? He said, I have written something. Can I hear it? So he starts reading. He says, once there was a worm who lived in a castle. His life was centered around how to eat, how to sleep. And that man is confused. He doesn't know what's happening. And in Hindi. So after one paragraph, he stops him. आप किसके बारे में लिख रहे हैं? For whom have you written this? So he says, why you asked me? This is the story of man. Isn't it? I mean, I don't know anything different about your or anybody's story. Then he didn't know. He was very embarrassed. In Chote Narayanji he could sometimes embarrass people with his utter straightforwardness. Once, one Mahamandaleshwar, you may be interested to know this. Mahamandaleshwar are big people in Hindu religion, like, cardinals. So he went and met him, and somebody took him there, something bishops and cardinals. So he went there, and so this man who took him there, he was not keen to meet, but he would meet all kinds of people just like that. So he pointed out that he has come from Aurobindo ashram. So this Mahamandaleshwar says, oh, Aurobindo, who writes the same thing again and again. That was it. He was reading Ashtavakra Gita, and Chotnaranji had vast knowledge of, even scholarly knowledge of all these things.
Yes.
Who had read the Mahabharata in original, he had all the volumes, Ramayana and all the scriptures and different types of Gita. So he tells him, the book which you are reading, Ashtavakra Gita, I can recite you from backward to front.
Whoa.
But can you tell me one sentence of Aurobindo which you have read where he tells the same thing over and over again? He exposed his lie in one moment. This man didn't know. Obviously, he had not read. He didn't know. So he's fumbling. No, is this, you are speaking, aap kisko le aaye, whom have you got? He doesn't know how to behave with. He said, no, it's not about behavior. Now when there is Shastra, it's Shastra. It's not about behavior. So that kind of a person. So very straightforwardly he told him, well, this is human life. So here we have a description, half animated for a passing show. Human life is like that. Or a castaway on the ocean of desire. Gods are playing with us, the Shudra gods, the lower gods, the vital gods, using us as an instrument of desire. Then when the job is over, when we cannot fulfill their appetite, thrown away. Sick, now you are in the hospital. Where are those vital gods? They are playing with somebody else. They have switched screens. Flung to the eddies in a ruthless port and tossed along the gulfs of circumstance. A creature born to bend beneath the yoke. A chattel and a plaything of time's lords.
Or one more soul you have to get.
Or one more pawn who comes destined to be pushed. One slow move forward on a measureless board. In the chess play of the earth's soul with doom. Such is the human figure drawn by time. But one stood up and lit the limitless flame.
Yes.
I love these passages.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure everyone, it's so fiery, so inspiring.
Yes.
We are not here for this. We are not here to be in our comfort zones, in our cocoons, in our housing, that slogan, roti kapda makan, what is it called in English? Housing, food and shelter. That's all. Human life is nothing more than that. Even animals have it. Plus they have some emotions. So what should be different about human life? Something more, something different.
And this is the first time we see that he calls Savitri a self-born force.
Yes.
A conscious frame was here, a self-born force.
This is the original sense of, these stories where a power or a conscious being is born through yagna. Now, unfortunately, they don't understand. So, in both Draupadi and Savitri's story, they are yagya seni. They are born out of a yagna. The parent or the father does the yagna. But I saw one of the interpretations, unfortunately, of the great Mr. Devdutt Patnaik. But he suddenly shows Savitri is born fully adult. Now, that's silly. I mean, they must be hallucinating to make a full-blown lady by yagna. By yagna, it means that she, with the fire of aspiration, a conscious being enters into a baby.
Yes.
But that being is far ahead in his or her inner life, comes for a mission and will eventually fulfill it. He is watching over and making sure that the destiny moves in that direction. It's not just about a grown-up being, and all beings who come. Is this story of conscious birth is several times comes in Mahabharata and even the Ramayana. That when you do a yagna, when it's not just producing another child, but by yagna, by sacrifice, by aspiration, by lighting the flame inside, you bring a child who comes with a particular mission. And when you don't do this yagna and get a child, he is there simply to fulfill your ambition. That's your shadow which passes into the child.
Yes.
So here is, the conscious frame is self-born force. And look at the word conscious frame. He is speaking about the mind, life, and body.
Yes, yes.
Even that is conscious. Even as a child, her body is conscious. And mother gives several instances of that.
And this is, Sri Aurobindo devotes a whole book to the birth and quest.
Yes. There it's described.
Yeah.
Now you see, now again he brings the problem once again. In this enigma of the dusk of God, where day and night meet, this slow and strange, uneasy compromise of limiting nature with a limitless soul. I think this is the real issue.
Yes.
The soul always dreams of beauty, of perfection, of love, but nature doesn't allow it. It runs in fixed grooves. And all the great dreams which Shakespeare is referring to,
Yeah.
they begin to turn into dust as soon as we wake up to the so-called harsh realities.
Oh.
So this is the other problem. So why should the soul retreat? It must impose itself on nature and fulfill itself. Where all must move between an ordered chance and an uncaring blind necessity. Now he gives the subtle reason for this. Too high the fire spiritual dare not blaze. It's not allowed. There is a divine purpose behind it. It's a slow preparation of nature. If it's too rapidly, the soul fire increases and nature is not ready. What will happen? The soul, either there will be a breakdown, too much fire, the baker who bakes the clay, he knows it very well. That if you are, preparing the cake, if you raise the temperature too much, it's all burnt. If it's too light, it's uncooked. So you have to have just the right temperature for the right time. So it's a slow process. Otherwise, nature will just finish off. That's why you cannot, even if you want, you have read, and you aspire, but nature will bring you back. Basically, what is nature doing? It's simply saying that I am also here. Don't ignore me. Don't neglect me. You have to take me along. I too must share something of this light. And those who try to force it through the mind, it doesn't work out because then it recoils back.
Yes.
And recoils in a very, very sharp way. So it's by the slow growth of this fire and nature gradually gets oriented. So he is giving us the reason.
And here we get the word shatter.
Shatter. If once it met the intense original flame, if this spiritual fire blazes and touches the original flame, which is the supramental house of the fire, that's where the Agni's original house, the divine will. So what would happen? An answering touch might shatter all measures made, and earth sink down with the weight of the infinite. So you see, so many things Sri Aurobindo and the mother had to see.
Yes.
While they are embodying, they have to also veil, they have to give only this much, not too much, how much. At the same time, they have to prepare that we be ready to receive more and more. So this is the process of this yoga. And if one is impatient, then this yoga is not for the person. You have to be patient, you have to be enduring, you have to be persevering, you have to refuse to give up, you have to live with trust and keep on increasing to whatever extent. Sometimes it'll be, as he said, it's a trench warfare. So you move one step forward, you move one step backward. Sometimes there will be days like that. Maybe in the beginning, weeks and months. Then sometimes you see suddenly you have leaped, covered a big ground, you don't know how. And then you look back and say, grace must have pushed me through the chasm. Then you are moving, everything is wonderful. Then again you meet something and you start falling up and down, up and down. This is the process because it's a preparation and it applies at the same thing, collective level. So people who get too disheartened by seeing 5 years or 10 years in the history of a nation or the world, just need to, have a little more trust in the divine. And then he brings another dimension to it. A jail is this immense material world. Across each road stands armed a stone-eyed law. So because the material world, so the stone-eyed law. Means it will not look left, not look right. We have classic example. Every time you go inside, if there is a diktat, No flowers, no flowers. You can't say, I feel today so deeply moved, please allow me to offer a small little flower at the Samadhi. No. So people have found ways. For every law you have a way. So people carry it like this, smiling face.
Slipping.
What to do? Because the soul in man is stronger than his fate. You suddenly, take 2 steps extra forward. So, because obviously, absolute rules is stupidity. Yes, you have rules, but there should always be a deeper understanding. The spirit has to be respected. That don't create chaos by all kinds of heaps of flowers. That is understandable.
Right.
So, but stone-eyed law.
In the little room, the little meditation room where Mother used to give soup,
Yes.
where Sri Aurobindo's presence is in the photo.
Yes.
They've closed it forever.
I know that.
And they told me, you'll just have to get used to it.
I know, it was so beautiful. As you are entering, and very often instead of turning right, I go straight and then turn.
Yes.
And you get that vision of, the room where Sri Aurobindo, and then you turn. Now there is a door shut onto you. So I said, okay, that means Lord will now begin to open more and more your inner doors.
Good for you.
Because he will steal in. Nothing can stop him from stealing in. But yeah, that kind of, just rules for whatever fanciful thing. So stone-eyed law. At every gate, the huge, dim, sentinel space. A great tribunal of the ignorance, an inquisition of the priests of night, in judgment sit on the adventurer's soul. So there are, when you walk this path towards utter freedom, even your closest ones will not understand you. They'll sit on judgment. Because they don't understand freedom. Yes. People understand law, they understand rules. But freedom? Yes. What is that? And Mother says that, my child, one of the reasons why we created the ashram was to learn to lead a normal life and yet free within. But we either mistake freedom for, external, whatever I feel like I'll do. Licentiousness. Or we think the other way is you must have a lot of rules one after another. Yeah. But it doesn't help because see, only that rule helps which you have chosen yourself. Out of your own freedom, the bonds you have chosen, because you have chosen this is the path for me to grow. So you choose a bond and yet you are free inside. Yes. You're not bound by it. It's your journey, you know it. But, so...
just one note on this word jail.
Yes.
Gaol.
Yes.
The old English spelling. Sri Aurobindo uses this and JAIL as well in some.
Jail delivery.
Yes. So he uses both spellings of jail.
Jail delivery reminds me of Krishna's birth. But when he uses it in the sense that we are all, in a jail, we don't realize.
Yes.
Men like Stephen Hawking were lucky that, because he was so crippled, he wanted to go beyond, if I have to psychologically understand, he wanted to go beyond the boundaries of the material universe because materially he was so badly bound.
Yeah.
And indeed he crossed over. He gave the idea of multiverses. Of course, this idea was there in philosophy as well as it started coming in science. But then he subscribed to that idea that there is, the moment he said black holes, information can be lost, it may evaporate. So where does it evaporate? So you have to come up with the idea of multiverse. There is something beyond this material universe. Now you see how he turned that jail into a means for, because he realized.
Yes.
So while there are laws, order, everything is there. There is something out there which gives the sense of randomness unless you look beyond, and he didn't use the word. Perhaps they were still thinking of other material universes. But that doesn't matter because you can even use the word material universes provided you agree that matter is made differently. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that in the Life Divine.
Yes.
Ascending series of substance. Then further, and the dual tables and the karmic norm Restrain the titan in us and the God. So we seesaw between good and bad, virtue and vice. Pain with its lash, joy with its silver bribe. Guard the wheels circling immobility. It doesn't allow us to go beyond. So this is the big challenge. A bond is put on the high climbing mind. A seal on the too large, wide open heart. Death stays the journeying discoverer, life. And I think this is the real problem, that as long as there is disease, as long as there is death, you cannot have divine life upon earth. As long as the body is what it is, you can have wonderful experiences inside. But frankly, what's the point? Unless they are a step towards this conquest, then it makes sense that this is a step on the journey. But if these experiences are there just to make us feel happy, then they become lollipops, candies. Because you come back, this is the same hard stuff of matter. You have to come to grips with it. It's iron law, which doesn't allow all the beautiful things that you are experiencing.
Yes.
It's in fact, it would be even more frustrating. Because so the divine sometimes spares us. Because you have seen that, that famous story of Surdas, that Radha, the divine mother, gives him sight out of her benevolence. He is blind otherwise by birth. And then he beholds her. And then she says, ask my child whatever boon you want. He says, take away these eyes. She says, why? The eyes that have looked upon you, how can I see anything else? People often ask, on which note we can close, Till we had not come to Pondicherry. Even today I was remembering this because some friends went. So I was remembering those days with nostalgia when I would come as a visitor and what would happen on the day of going. It is so pitiable, so miserable, I would suddenly slipped into that mood which now we take for granted. That atmosphere, the touch, and you are beginning to get into that state, oh, I have to leave this behind, I have to go back to that rut. So, having tasted Sri Aurobindo, having known what Mother and Sri Aurobindo are, having felt this light which vibrates here, you just can't take likeness to anything lesser. It just spontaneously drops off because you just can't. It's something too beautiful, too unbelievably true. So I suppose that's what it is, that we are not allowed. And as long as death is there, as long as, that's the tragedy, that, we have to go back and start again with the school bag.
Yeah.
And one of my things is I don't want to start with the school bag again. It's not fair. You have learned everything. And then you have to start all over ABCD again. It's not done.
Yeah.
But that's how life is. So death stays the journeying discoverer, life. So I think they hit the nail right on the head when they saw the problem, that as long as there is disease, death, the limitations of nature, the karmic law, the gods, the titans, along with the aspiration of the soul, life will be miserable. Either you become an animal, which is obviously not the course, or you evolve into something higher. Or if that is not possible, then Sri Aurobindo says, then the only logical thing is escape. Then obviously then there is nothing more to be done.
Yeah.
But then it makes a nonsense of creation, and naturally a nonsense of God's will in creation. I think we can stop here and read who the mother is on the day of her coming.
Yes.
That beautiful passage.
Wonderful.
Yes. And few more.
Good.